Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. I would like to express my deepest gratitude for having invited me to talk about the situation in the Arab world and specifically the situation in Tunisia and the relationship of this situation to Europe and to Germany. This is a very important situation and it is of interest to us and of interest to you because distances have been shortened as a result of the communication revolution. Because interests are intertwined, they became integrated. I would try my best to adhere to the timetable, although this topic is highly important and although I would love to elaborate a bit more. What happened in Tunisia and in other countries in the Arab world, especially in North Africa, are to be described as revolutions, transitions, popular revolutions, youth revolutions, who are revolting against ever so deteriorating conditions. If those problems are not addressed, if those conditions are not improved, then the revolutions would simply go on. And the threat is that it would become even more violent. Because the driving force for its revolution, for the outbreak of for these revolutions were not addressed. So what are these reasons? What was the driving force for this revolution? First of all, they are socio-economic reasons. They are the differences between different social strata. It is a geographic and a social division line. It is unemployment among university graduates. It is the lack of sustainable development, the lack of education infrastructure, the lack of healthcare. In brief, it is the lack of good governance, the lack of management of human and natural resources. The second reason would be the following: political dictatorship, authoritarian rule by one person or one party, military rule, meaning lack of freedoms, all of them, for everyone, respecting human rights, or rather lack thereof, establishing a truly democratic system, especially conducting free and transparent elections to find out the people's opinion about the rulers. All those reasons would pave the way to corruption at the administrative level, at the financial level, in all sectors. The third reason is the different ideological and cultural affiliations and stagnation, which is expressed through social congestion. This congestion is nurtured through movements from the East and West. At least in my own country, this is the case. Those groups can be only described as extremists. They refuse being moderate. They refuse openness. These are principles of our Islamic culture. Being open and being moderate. Those movements tend to be violent, tend to impose their ideas on society. Ladies and gentlemen, please bear in mind that those three reasons are strongly interconnected. They all affect each other and they all result from the lack of good governance, la bonne gouvernance. Perhaps the second reason, which is dictatorship and the lack of freedoms in all their forms, is the main source of influence on the two other reasons, or it's mainly the real cause. So we can describe it as the key to solving all disputes and solving all crises. No development, no social justice, no balance and no societal peace could be achieved without granting the people those freedoms and without building democratic institutions in the country. So the starting point would be this, ladies and gentlemen, with political reform. How are we to start to establish good governance? We are talking about an institutional state that is entrusted with establishing rule of law, just as you did in Europe. When you were facing dictatorships and successfully removed them, establishing a democratic system was the key to development and a key to establishing societal or social democracy. This is the responsibility of the political elite in my country. Also, the components of the civil society bears a responsibility to come up with a consensus, political consensus, and establish a participatory political culture. This is a necessity in this transitional phase, which can be described also as highly critical. It's very important to establish democratic, cultural and political pluralism, intellectual pluralism, accepting the others, and the peaceful handover of power through free and democratic, transparent elections. And this is what Al-Nahda movement has done. We accepted the Troika rule in spite of the different ideological and intellectual affiliations. We also agreed on a constitution that would be described as a constitution for all Tunisians. We also willingly accepted, leaving the government now, at this point in time, to form a more impartial government which would lead the elections so that we can achieve transparency and guarantee transparency in the election process. We did that, so in the coming phase we can focus on addressing the social and economic issues which are of paramount importance in Tunisia. This, ladies and gentlemen, is our duty as far as domestic policy is concerned. Now to the role of Europe, and especially the role of Germany, is to support these efforts and being assertive in doing so, meaning they are to oppose any movement that that intends to carry out a coup. This is very important. Freedoms have to be respected. Political Islam or extremists, we cannot use double standards. We have to face very honestly any attempts to carry out a coup. Legitimacy is a key word here, and democracy is the aim. This is the only option, and this option is deeply rooted in our Islamic culture because it's a universal principle reflected in honoring the human being. God, Allah, has said, we honored the human being. So any attempt to create a coup and to impede this path towards democracy can be considered as a moral and historic crime because it would increase the congestion of conditions and it would impede the establishment of social democracy. And more importantly, such practices which encourage frustration among young people and among the population at large and would justify violent reactions and widespread terrorism and chaos, which would not be confined to our region alone. It would go beyond borders, beyond seas, and would reach Europe at some point. There are some points that these movements could lead to, which are the Arab communities living in Europe. They're integrated in the European society. They can be instrumentalized to disseminate chaos in our region and in your region. This violence, this turmoil threatens any form of cooperation, economic cooperation or trade cooperation or political cooperation between us. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we need to insist on the success of those peaceful revolutions, which would happen only through the establishment of democratic states. No cooperation, no peace, no partnership can happen unless it's between democratic states. And you have been through this experience, and I mean the universal definition of democracy, our common universal definition. This definition respects cultures, it respects freedoms, and above all, it respects the dignity of the human being. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all for the good, for the peace among peoples and countries, and thank you very much for your attention.